Okay, welcome back everybody to the Jiu Jitsu Mindset. So glad you're here. And today we have my partner in crime, Professor Lucas Rubbo. Professor,
Hello, Peter. How are you doing? Finally here, hopefully for the whole episode this
I
time.
know that's right.
Yeah.
Well, watch your Wi-Fi. You know what? I think it might
Do you
be
know do you know what it is? I
what is
think
it?
I think we need to sell more submission coffee, have our studio, and
That's
then I
right.
won't need to rely on myself on Wi-Fi anymore.
That's
How
right.
about that?
So I think that's a good idea. So we are 2.5 million bags short of our studio. All right. So let's get the ticker running. Go to submissioncoffee.com and it'll take you to the site and where that. And Professor, you may not even, I might have snuck this in and didn't even tell you, but the podcast now has its own website. So the
That's amazing.
jujitsumindset.com, we have our own, we're growing up. So we're about, I don't know, 55 episodes in, which
Yep.
by the way, puts us in the top 2% of all podcasts. So we are survivors, Professor. I don't care what anyone says.
We're winners already.
We are winners already. So listen, we things have gone so well for us because we keep getting the chance to talk to amazing people. And today is no different. And one of the things that is such a pleasure to me is that we get a chance to talk with folks that have experiences that not many people have. And through our questions, you and I get the privilege of like doing it in person, but hopefully the people listening get
Mhm.
insights that they also wouldn't get if they didn't hear from somebody who were in sort of special circumstances, unique kind of circumstances. So Professor Steve Barnes is with us today, and he's been a police officer for over 10 years. But he's done really, I think, some pretty incredible things within that. He's a use of force instructor, and he's been on a SWAT team in California. So um, all law enforcement, people seem to have lots and lots of stories, but something tells me that Professor Steve has even more stories. So, Professor Steve, we're grateful that you took the time to join us. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you. Well, we have a lot of ways we could take the conversation, but as a podcast that was founded on sort of trying to encourage people and to either stay in jiu-jitsu or start in jiu-jitsu. That was sort of the reason why we started it. And along the way, we have found jiu-jitsu living in all kinds of important areas, including law enforcement. So maybe we could start with, like, as a black belt in jiu-jitsu, as a professor of jiu-jitsu, how has that how has that changed your career? Or what's the interplay between being in law enforcement, particularly, obviously as a use and force instructor and in SWAT, like the use of force is, critically important to you, and jiu-jitsu, of course, is a martial art. So could you talk a little bit about the relationship between your profession and your life as a jiu-jitsu black belt?
And Peter, let
Yes.
me, if you don't mind, let me add this to
Yes.
the question. While being a law enforcement, a police officer, right, law enforcement for over a decade, and the black belt, it looks like they're kind of like start really close to each other. So
Oh,
which
yeah.
which was came first? If you jiu-jitsu, you start practicing jiu-jitsu and then became a police officer, or was opposite? If they're correlated, right? The reasons
Mm.
why you train. So if I could add a little bit more to the question, please.
Well, I always think it's a pretty funny story, and I tell it to people pretty often. Is that I sort of feel like my jujitsu career and my law enforcement career have been deeply, deeply intertwined.
Mm.
I think I owe a lot of my law enforcement career to jujitsu.
Mm.
Professor, to sort of start with your question, I grew up in New Jersey, and like a lot of younger kids, I started to see the UFC and things like that. And I said, oh, well, that looks really cool. Maybe I could do that. And so back in, I guess it was the early 2000s, maybe it would be early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
I started looking around for a school, and there weren't that many schools around in my area, and dropped into one that was taught by a brown belt. And I think that sort of at that time, I just wasn't ready for jujitsu. You know, I played sports a lot and thought I was, you know, pretty cool at that time. And, you know, the age old story of, you know, the 120-pound person goes and, you know, wraps this piece of fabric around your neck and you tap and you're like, what just happened to me? And so I think my ego wasn't quite ready for that at that time. So sort of put that on the back burner and then came to school in Arizona and started out doing jujitsu a little more frequently. And that's where I guess I really say that I started jujitsu was in college and majored in exercise and wellness at Arizona State. And I guess through life, got a decent job and sort of put jujitsu on the back burner to just try and establish myself. And then moved to California. And it was always just something in the back of my head that I said, I want to go back to. I always enjoyed it, loved it so much. And I figured at some point I'd get back to it. And then in California, I decided, you know what? I'd like to give law enforcement a shot. I think that I'd be a good person for it. Uh, we'll see if I make it. And, you know, if I make it, then we give it a run. And ended up getting hired. And I said, you know what? I need to be able to protect myself. I need to be able to be confident in my skills was the main thing. And so I got back into jujitsu pretty soon after I graduated from the police academy. And from there, it's just been going ever since. So I guess to say that I owe a lot of things to jujitsu, the story is it was one of the first trainings at my department when I was in California, when I was pretty new on. I want to say maybe less than a year on. And everybody in the department goes through this training every year. And it's different trainings all the time. But this one, it was sort of a scenario. I want to say it was, someone going into like a daycare with a weapon and saying that they were going to kill people, something like that.
Right.
And the person is dressed in a big padded suit, and you're supposed to just go with it like it's real life. And me being not the biggest guy, like 155 pounds, and this guy was a canine officer. He was probably about 240, knows his stuff. He actually has a judo background. But we go in there and, I'm talking to him, and the end result of the scenario is that you're supposed to go hands on and arrest this guy. And so I grab him and just sort of naturally, he comes at me, I grab him and I hip toss him. And a lot of the people, a lot of the training personnel of the department are sort of standing at the side. And I can remember as we're sort of going through the air, sort of seeing them out of the corner of my eye, and their mouths are all just dropped. Like, what is going on? And we hit the ground and I get them in handcuffs. And they're like, okay, end scenario. And everybody's like, hey, you know a little bit, don't you? I'm like, well, I mean, I've done jujitsu a little bit. I'm a white belt, but I've done a little jujitsu. And people just from there, when you're beginning in law enforcement, sort of that big hurdle to get over in the beginning is, this rookie doesn't know anything. This rookie, he's scared. They don't know how to handle confrontation. That sort of changed their mindset sort of very quickly, automatically for me. And from there, people, it gave a lot of trust to the people in the department. And again, I was just a white belt. I think at that time, I probably had done jujitsu for maybe a year and a half. Nothing crazy in the grand scheme of jujitsu, but as you all know, compared to someone that has never done jiu-jitsu, that's a huge amount of knowledge.
Yes.
So that really sort of set me apart, and sort of from there, again, that trust developed very quickly, and I ended up getting a lot of special assignments and people allowing me to work with them and things that I feel I wouldn't have gotten without jiu-jitsu, basically.
Yeah.
And it seems like one was motivating the other, right? As you had that first experience where you were able to use your jiu-jitsu in a way that you only not defend yourself, but you got everyone else looking to you now, right, in a different way. So I believe this even helped you to commit yourself even more to jiu-jitsu. And when you were on the jiu-jitsu room, on the gym, on the school, you were already thinking also like how much this could help you on your job, right? So it's kind of like one motivating the other all the way along, it seems like.
Yes, I'm the type of person, I explain it to a lot of the guys that I work with, that I don't know how some police officers, and this isn't a knock, but I guess it is a bit of a knock, that so many officers can go through their careers just sort of hoping that they're good enough.
Yes.
Never sort of saying, okay, I need to know for sure that I can handle myself. Just sort of going through call to call, day to day, saying, well, if something happens, I think I'd be good enough. I think I'm trained enough. And even me as a black belt, I don't feel 100% confident, but I always am working towards making sure that I am as prepared as I can possibly be. So I tell guys all the time, if you want to take that chance and you want to hit the streets and say, well, I hope I'm okay. I watched a video, the department trains me, a couple times a year for a couple of hours, and that's what I go off of. I say, that's on you. But for me, it's very important that I have that confidence to be able to go out there and do whatever I need to do to be able to get home to my family and keep people safe on the street.
We've had, I mean, there's so much like in that part of the conversation that we could spend a lot of time. We've had Officer Freddie Trillo from Florida, who began his rookie year as an officer, got into a fight and it didn't go well, and he got very, very badly hurt, and that began his road towards jiu-jitsu. To your point, if you feel like you're sufficiently prepared, are you really sufficiently prepared? And I've seen, since he's been a guest, and it's been some time since he was on our podcast, I now pay attention a little differently to people like Tom DeBlas and a few other folks who are critical of the law enforcement community for being insufficiently prepared, where they feel like a good high school wrestler is a terrible threat to you. Like, you won't be able to handle like a good high school wrestler, never mind. And then, pick all the other things that could be scary out there. As you went and prepared yourself and then brought those skills to the field, do you have a story as to when your preparation served you and the people around you well, where it saved you or it saved other folks?
I tell this story a lot too. To me, it goes to show what training and consistent training can do. So I remember, again, in California, we got a call about a guy walking up on people's porches, and he had likely some type of mental illness. He was talking to himself, just sort of walking around, touching people's things, and then going off their porch and going to another one, talking to himself, just going from house to house. So me and another guy get there, and we get out of the car, and it's dark. It's probably 3 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And so we can't really see him, or I couldn't really see him. And so we say, hey, come over here, come to us. We're out in the street, and he sort of emerges from the shadows, and he's probably about 6'4", maybe 260, just a big guy.
Yeah, here we go.
Yeah. And he's there and he's just muttering to himself, and you can tell he's agitated. It's
Yeah.
not just the sky is blue, things like that. He's
Right.
agitated, and because of that, we go to detain him in handcuffs. And I remember I was on his left side. I was on his left side, and I remember looking at his shoulder because he's that much taller than me. But I remember seeing his shoulder, and I go to grab on his arm, and all of a sudden I see the sky, and I remember thinking to myself, why do I see the sky? I just saw his shoulder, and then I saw the sky, and I sort of looked down, and I have him in an armbar. I'm sort of I start turning, and I go down on an armbar, and I look back, and my partner is sort of fighting him, trying to get him in handcuffs. And so we finally are able to get him handcuffed. And I sort of look around, and I'm like, what happened? And I feel my mouth get real watery, and I spit, and it's all blood. And I'm like, oh, he punched me in the face. That's what that was. But even in that sort of split second of being dazed, not knowing exactly what to do, not knowing what's happening even, and having enough wherewithal to think things through in my mind, not sort of panic and freak out.
Yeah.
It was just my body went on autopilot. It was
Right.
arm there, grab arm and start going to an arm bar. There was no thought process in my mind. I was thinking something completely different. All I was thinking about was why I was seeing the sky first. But I just grabbed onto an arm and started, doing the things that I knew. And I tell people that's a very comforting thing to me.
Yes.
Is that if things are going badly, that my body is going to start going to the things that it knows. I'm going to try and get the quote correct, that you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your training.
Yes, right.
And that is what I've seen time and time and time again when it comes to police officers, is that a lot of people can be very cool, calm, and collected when it's, your normal, everyday, average crime, I guess you could say. But when things get bad, that's when people start just losing it.
Yeah.
And jiu-jitsu, I mean, there's not a whole lot of things that can replicate. And I've been there, I'm often there, that you have someone that's outweighs you by 100 pounds on top of you that knows how to hurt you.
Right.
And you have to keep your wits about you to say, okay, how do I protect myself, get out of this, and get on top of them and try and hurt them? How do I do that?
You can come train with us. Everybody in our gym is 100 pounds heavier than the professor and I, and all that. So, I mean, when you were talking, I was thinking of Rickson Gracie, who's got a famous, quote, right? He sucks about having educated instincts, and how, you're training your body so that way your instincts, the body wants to move in a particular way, and it knows what to do. And when I think about acquiring knowledge and skills, that kind of famous idea of like, you're unconsciously incompetent, you don't even know what you don't know. Then you're consciously incompetent, like you realize you don't know anything. And then you achieve conscious competence. And then sadly, many people then fall back into they don't even know what they don't know. And physically for me, my own, I'm a beginner and my journey is short relative to you and Professor Lucas, but watching my brain move the decisions from my lizard brain to my executive function of my brain, where I'm making choices rather than flailing. And then it seems like the next phase of that is to where like your lizard brain actually knows, okay, if you get punched in the face, a proper reaction is this. As an athlete, and then as you entered into a dangerous profession, training to do an arm bar where somebody is going to tell you to stop on the mats, and then being in a situation where a mentally ill person who's much larger than you, dangerous, and you may need to control sufficiently that you break that person's arm rather than get hurt, killed yourself or anyone around you. I'm curious about the training to break through that barrier, because most human beings, if they train in martial arts, are training with the notion that you might use this as a thing to protect yourself. But mostly that's theoretical. Most people don't have to cross that boundary. Could you talk about how you train to allow yourself to go through that boundary to dangerous rather than just in a sport context?
Well, I think with that, it's truly a mindset shift.
Okay.
You have to sort of work through your mind that, you are the person that, it sounds cliche. I mean, it is cliche, that you stand between, the bad guys and the good guys.
Right.
So you have to do whatever it takes to protect people. I I explain to people, I explain to the guys that I train that you, if nothing else, obviously you have to protect people, but also think you have to go home.
Right.
So whether you have a husband, wife, children, you have a mother or a father or a brother or sister, a cousin, someone that would miss you,
Right.
friends, someone that would miss you if something happened to you. So you have to go home. There are people that put themselves in these situations that they don't care about you. They don't care about what happens to you, what they have to do to get away. Sometimes it's people that are not thinking in their right mind, whether it be drugs or mental illness or something like that. What was explained to me often in my younger police days was all they see is a uniform. They don't see you. They don't see anything about. They don't see you as a person. They see you as a uniform. They see you as what I tell people is consequences personified.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. It's well said.
So they want to get away from you or incapacitate you so that they can be have a little more freedom for one more day.
Right.
So our main thing is, when we're going hands on, the end goal is to get people into custody. That's the end goal.
Right.
With that, if I can get someone into custody by speaking to them, ideal. If I can get someone into custody by just putting a hand on their shoulder and putting their hand behind their back, better too. If something happens where they have to go to the ground and I have to take them to the ground and then I put their hands behind their back, so be it.
Right.
All we're trying to do is take people into custody. That's always the end goal. But we have to respond with the appropriate level of force. If someone is willing to punch, stab, shoot, to not go into custody, then we have to do whatever it takes to get them into custody. So it's just truly a mindset of, okay, this is the job, this is the end goal. How can I best do that? And I think a lot of police officers throughout the years that I've seen have gotten much better at sort of keeping that in mind.
Yeah.
You do have, I will be the first to admit that you do have police officers that lose that it gets personal, that if you fight, then they take it personally and they want to inflict damage. There are bad police officers, just like there's, bad garbage men.
Right.
But, to me, I tell guys all the time after they fight that once they're in handcuffs and, we brush the dust off, I say, hey, man, it's only business. I'm not mad at you. I hope you're not mad at me. But, we're going to go to jail now and no hard feelings. And we move on. It's just a mindset of, you always have to win, is what a lot of, I guess, the prevailing phrases that we tell newer cops is that you always have to win. Whatever, and this will sound harsh, but whatever means necessary for you to win, for you to protect people, for you to go home, for you to keep your partner safe,
Right.
that's what you have to do within the confines of the law, obviously.
Without a
Sure.
doubt.
I was thinking really interesting what you were saying, Professor Steve, on the mindset, right? That's the mindset. And I find myself every single day when I wake up planning my next steps, right? Be whatever is going to be on that day. Is be like teaching a class, going for a training, going for a tournament, coaching, whatever it is. We have some things that we can control, and some things that we can't control, right? But on your world, a lot of things you can't control.
For sure.
And sometimes you're going to a ordinary day at your work and something happened. You need to shift everything that is around. You need to focus 100%, like we do for everything, right, to your next mission. But a lot of times, I believe your next mission that you don't know by like months ahead is a life threat situation, right? So if you could explain a little bit, I know it will be really hard, but if you could explain a little bit those 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes that you have, like going to that situation that is a really bad situation, what passed your mind through that scenario? Because you have your mindset, you have your goal, that is everything that you just explained to us, plus having a life threat situation there. So your goal, your end goal is also going home, right? So how you prepare yourself to that?
So there, like you said, you know, you're going, I guess you could say, call to call. You don't know what the next call is going to be. So, you know, sometimes, well, rarely do we have an extended amount of time to get a call and then get there. Usually it's maybe at the max 5 minutes, you know, drive time if you're driving across the city to get someplace. But again, it's mindset and it's the training that you've had. The training that you've had is what prepares you. We always try to do very realistic training because when you start off as a police officer and you say, okay, Steve, go handle this domestic violence call. And I say, well, I've never witnessed domestic violence. I don't know where to start. I have no idea. Okay,
Right.
well, we're going to give you this scenario of husband and wife, and he got home from work, he just got fired, and he's hit her. How would you respond? And you go through that training scenario and they critique it and they say, well, this was good, this was bad. And you sort of store that away in your mind. We say creating a training file so that now when that domestic violence call kicks out, you say, oh, okay, I think I've never been to a domestic violence call, but I did go to that training once. Okay, what did I do? Okay, all right. So that's sort of what I can do. I can mold it to something that I've been through already. We and my department is very good about doing training often and trying to be as realistic as possible, as in having, you know, cars being crunched up, people bleeding. You know, you have to respond and visually see things that you would see on scene. Whereas sometimes some departments, you know, maybe training budgets aren't that big, maybe they don't have the time, but you're just sort of, you know, maybe even talking about, you know, hey, what would you do in this situation? Which is better than nothing, definitely. But you're just working through these situations in your mind of what you would do. And I'm sure you guys have talked about it. I'm sure you guys have done it as well. Things like visualization, and just sort of putting yourself in a situation where you say, okay, well, if there is an active shooter at the mall and he's by Macy's, well, where would I go? What store would I go into? Or what exit entrance would I go into? Okay, I'd go in there. All right. Well, what stores are there? How would I tell responding officers how to get there? What else would I do? And you just work through it in your mind so that when you are responding to that big call, it's not the first time. We say it's not the first time that you've done it, even if it is the first time, because you've thought about it, if nothing.
Yes.
So Professor Steve, I'm super old, obviously goes without saying I'm super old. But so in like the mid 80s, I was involved with there was a camp for 50 years in Arizona called Anytown. And part of the instruction
I
of the
thought you were
camp,
gonna say you were involved on a gang on mid 80s here, Peter.
that in fact, well, I'll tell a gang story at another time, but I actually was working with anti-gang movements, but I was doing some work with police officers about trying to repair and foster good relationships between teenagers and the police officers. And so I got a chance to have conversations. And so one of the things that really was instructive to me about how different the life of a police officer is to other people's lives. There was this gentleman, and we had like a natural affinity to each other. We liked each other, and we were talking. And so I said, "Well, can you tell me like what was it like the first time out to like something, something traumatic?" And so he in his like very beginning, in his first going out to houses and whatnot, he rolls up to this house, and a man has chopped the head of his wife off, and he is out in the front yard with this woman's head in his hands. And when he told me the story, I realized like there are experiences in that world that like are only believable probably by other people who are in that world. Because when I think about uncomfortable circumstances I've been in, or I think about, skirmishes as a kid, as a teenage kid, what I think of as fights, that when I talk to people like you, and like Todd Fox was on us last week, like, I haven't really been in a fight that looks anything like that. So I'm curious about the relationship between your training and the things that there is no way to have visualized. Like as he expressed that to me, what struck me as much as anything, besides just the horror of a person experiencing that, was like, as a professional, you have to deal with this circumstance. But I'm sure he felt like he was in a movie, like and he had to find within himself the discipline to stay calm, not act as a agent of revenge for something clearly horrifying. So I'm just curious, like, for those moments, and as a person on the SWAT team, you probably got stories that would be equally blood curdling, and not that I'm asking you to trot those out per se, but I am interested in just training in a gym, training in a facility, and then encountering something that you just could not have possibly expected, like what the relationship between those two things might have been in your career and in your life.
Well, I guess to start off, I'll say that Jiu Jitsu definitely helps with stress inoculation.
Yeah.
That just, if nothing else, it takes much more for me to get really frazzled, I guess you could say, because I know that my training partners aren't going to kill me. Sometimes they might, act like they're going to kill me. But I know in the back of my head that they're not going to kill me. But I think through all the martial arts that I know, there aren't many that you can replicate someone going very, very close to 100% in trying to break your limbs, render you unconscious, things like that. So that takes the edge off of a lot of things. I remember the quote from Fight Club that, after you fought, everything else in your life gets the volume turned down.
Yeah.
That's sort of how it is for me after all these years, to see, to have to grab onto someone that's yelling at me, saying that they're going to kill me. And for better or worse, it's sort of like, yeah, you're not really going to kill me. I mean, I'm not that worried. We'll see. But it's just you work through things as best you can. You keep your head about you, then you have to remember that we're all humans. You have to remember that
Yes, right. Yes.
we all have good days and bad. We all do things that we regret. And you just work through things with people. If you if someone is screaming at you and you just start screaming back at them, and then they go a little higher and you go a little higher and they go higher and you go higher, nothing gets solved. People sort of laugh at me at work because I talk sort of so quietly, and they always say that people just they can't get mad at me. Well, really, at work, there's two sets of people for me, that either they absolutely hate me or they absolutely love me. There is no in between.
There's not, no.
So really just sort of working with people, trying to get to their level, trying to meet them where they are, and just remember, a lot of times there's two people involved or two parties involved, and one person's telling you one thing, another person's telling you another, and probably somewhere in the middle is the actual truth.
Yes, right.
So you have to work through, and you have to really just be a human.
Right. Yes, nice.
And meet people where they are and work with them through the situation. So you might not have the training or really thought about whatever situation, but you just sort of say, okay, well, this is the situation that I'm in.
Right.
What is the best route that we can get to get to a good outcome? And there's a wide range. To equate it to jiu-jitsu, you could do 3 different sweeps from half guard. Any of them get you on top, that's the goal, but you just got to pick one. So there's a wide range of ways that you can solve a problem. You just have to pick one and work towards getting to the ideal end goal. That's the main thing.
Yeah, I mean, so that one of the things that I think that calls people to is what I would think of as maturity, because like what you're describing is you're being trained in principle, right? You're like, stress inoculation is to be able to be in the uncomfortable situation and force yourself back towards finding some place of comfort rather than escalation, right?
Yes.
I mean, if there's, Todd Fox on the previous episode in terms of protecting people, like if you're in a fight, you're at the end of the options, first
everything went wrong.
Everything went wrong, right? Like you want to go, I have this little silly story that always stays with me. I have a friend who got his black belt 20 years ago, and and we're in his backyard, and our kids are all pretty young at the time, and all the kids, of course, are enthralled with the fact that he's a black belt, and they all want to talk to him about his training, and so they're inevitably come up, well, like, what's your best move? What do you what do you do that? And I remember he brings the kids over and he lines them up, and he's like, okay, I'm going to show you my best move. And he starts doing some crazy stuff, and he puts a mean face on, and then he turns around and runs. He's like, this is my best move. I got to get out of here. But the notion of like training in principle, like, hey, rather than escalate, de-escalate, rather than see somebody, they see you as the consequence personified. You don't see them as evil and personified, that you're flexible in the moment, and you're able to kind of draw upon the principles of, this is a human being, this is not their best day, we treat them with the dignity of being a human being, and try not for either one of us not to go home, if at all possible, right? I mean, and then we have an order of priority. We go home first, if should it come to that. So I mean, with that being said, when you think about your maturity, which has probably some combination of a natural disposition, a great amount of training, when you look at people around you, have you seen a level of safety, or have you seen a difference in the level of safety from the people who adopt learning these principles and training them, both in terms of their own safety and the safety of the people who they're dealing with, versus the people who are inoculating themselves to greater levels of stress and learning about how to feel safe in a de-escalation pattern? Because many people, when you're here yelling, you're in a fight, you think you're safer if you're the louder yeller or the first to throw the punch. And although maybe a first punch has its value in some ways, for your situation, like learning how to de-escalate is a greater like efficacy, I imagine.
Yes. So again, another story. I remember I always love to be on calls with other people that do jujitsu. There aren't a ton, sadly, at my department. There aren't a ton in general, but the number is growing. But you can always tell. You can always tell. And I remember I made a car stop on an SUV, and I think it had 3 people in it: the driver, front passenger, and then there was a woman in the back seat. The back seat passenger, the woman in the back seat, had a warrant for her arrest, and I calmly, I'm talking to the driver, just sort of killing time until backup arrives and people get there. And I walk back to the back seat. I open the back door and I say, "Hey, miss, you have a warrant. I need you to hop out." And she says, "No." Gave me some more choice words and says, "I'll kill you if you try and take me out of this car." And again, that's one of those times that I said, I don't think so, but we'll see. And so I grab onto one of her arms, and a guy opens the other door and grabs onto her other arm.
Mm.
And she's screaming that, I forget if she said I have a gun or I have something and I'm going to kill you both and this and that. And I could feel the other officer's tension through her as
Mm.
I'm holding on, that
How
he's
interesting.
just sort of shaking
Yeah,
and like,
yeah.
"Oh no, oh no." And I half am telling her, "Hey, calm down," as I'm sort of leaned to the side and sort of looking at him saying,
Calm
Calm
down.
"Calm
down.
down. It'll all be fine. We're not going to worry about this." And I end up like sort of walking into the car and pushing her out, and we get her in handcuffs. But yeah, there's a big difference
Yeah.
between those people that just, again, I get, I don't understand it, so I can't say that I know the feeling. That I guess just hope that their training, the training that they've been given, is
Right.
enough.
Yeah.
But one guy that I ended up getting to come to my gym and start training very regularly, he went to another part of the city, and I wish he was still on my
Yeah.
part of the city, because
Yeah.
every time that he came to a call, I sort of said, "Oh, we're good. We're good. I'm solid. We're good. I'm not worried." Because he just had that calmness about him. And I don't think it's a what's the word, that he an overconfidence. It's not
Yeah.
an
Right. Right.
overconfidence,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's just a confidence that, okay, whatever happens, we'll deal with it.
Hmm.
I've done all I can to train. I've done all I can to prepare myself, and we'll work with it from there. So again, I don't know how guys can go through their whole careers, especially in this day and age where there's
Yeah.
so many jujitsu gyms, and I tell guys all the time, when they ask me, "Hey, well, where should I go? What's the best jujitsu gym?" And I say, "Well, where do you live? Because I'm sure there's one very close to you.
Yeah. For
Yeah.
sure.
That's a good enough place to start. Or come to
Mhm.
my gym, or come to the trainings that we have at the police department. Whatever it takes." So yeah, hopefully that answers your
Yes.
question.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's awesome because I separate a question. right when we started, and you just got back to exactly what I need. Because you were actually already answered, but I will ask anyway. How much do you feel your jiu-jitsu black belt like weights on your shoulder from other officers? You know, like knowing that they're with you. Oh, I'm good. It's gonna be a good day. I'm safe. You know, whatever happens, he's the guy. Steve's the guy to fix it. So how much you feel that this actually happened? And I mean, of course, you were doing that, and you were doing everything that you can, so you feel prepared and confident to deal with the situation. But now you have another person right by you that's supposed to be helping you, and he's relying 100% on you. You know, so this actually happen quite often, or no?
Well, I have, I guess, a bit of a reputation that when I get there, people sort of say, "Oh, well, okay, if we have to go hands on, at least Steve Barnes is here, so we have to worry a little less." And that's something that I'm very thankful for. I'm happy that I can be there when there is a call that has a high likelihood of us having to fight someone or go hands on. I try and go. I try and be there because I do want to add my, I guess you could say, expertise to be able to help. But yeah, I actually, when I was coming back from a training today, a bunch of guys, we were very tired. It was a bike school, so we had ridden 12 miles through up a mountain, basically on trails and up a mountain and all that stuff. And this was the end of a 5-day class, and we were all very exhausted. And I wasn't in the best mood, and I was sort of quiet, just relaxing. And everybody sort of said, "Hey, just leave Steve alone, or else he'll choke us all out." And I said, "No, no, I won't do that. I probably could, but I won't do that." So there is that reputation, and more so probably because of I do a lot of instruction at the police department, and I what I do is I teach a ground fighting class, and sort of at the end, well, I guess throughout the class, we have people doing situational drills with each other, and a lot of them have not a lot of experience, so they're working with someone that is at their level. And then at the end, I always do, okay, you guys, everybody is going to go 1 minute with me, because I want you to feel what it feels like when someone knows what they're doing, and hopefully how scary that is to you. And so a lot of people that have gone through that ground fighting class have felt what it feels like to have, and I'm no world champion or anything like that, but they know what it feels like to have someone who knows what to do,
Right.
and sort of stopping every attempt that they have and knowing where they're going a minute before they know where they're going, and hopefully how scary that is, and hopefully that pushes them to train a little more. But I like to think that that gives them comfort when I come on the scene, that I can be a positive influence, whether it's just adding a calmness because I'm not worried, because I say, "Hey guys, we'll do whatever it takes. We'll work through it." Or when we go hands on, then if I can get my hands on them, I'm doing the stuff that I know how to do, or sort of helping to instruct people on, "Hey, you hold that arm, I'll work on this arm. Hey, get on his legs. Hey, control his head, and we'll work through it." That type of thing.
Cool. Yeah, that's how I was imagining. It's not necessarily only the actual act, but just your presence, right? You give your partners extra confidence that they can work through things, knowing that the mistakes can be made, but you also gonna have an answer for that, and this is gonna raise the level for them as well, and hopefully they will be able to carry and pass this for other officers in the future. Right? So that's great.
I will say, as someone who has, been interested in sort of that, the dynamic of the perception of the police doing their good work in the world, I've come to agree with the idea that in those hands-on situations, the jiu-jitsu restraint looks very different than an untrained officer whose only thoughts are hitting or boxing or something. That from a relationship perspective to the community, even though the jiu-jitsu moves may have more uh, effect and be more dangerous, they look different on camera, which I think matters in today's day and age. And um, I would love, and I don't know whether this is true, but from what little research that I've done is that there is a less degree of injury for both officer and offender in places where the training in jiu-jitsu is higher. So it
Yeah.
seems like, there's it's curious to me why it's not a mandated thing, just given that there seems to be a preponderance of evidence that there's value for everybody involved. The community looks at things differently, the police officers are safer, and the assailants are less injured as well. The professor and I have many, many, many questions that we would like to ask you, but as we come upon like an hour, the last one, and the professor may have one last one too, but the last one that I want to ask you is, do you have a story of the personal transformational power of jiu-jitsu and sort of your observation of people around you? Because as in the years in which you've been training, I'm sure you've observed other people's journey. And one of our little expressions, right, is like lessons learned on the mats applied to life off the mats. And for people in your type of profession, those lessons, carry large consequences or values. But I think in many people's lives, they take their stress inoculation into lots of different opportunities. So do you have any stories that stick out of people you saw that like they started jiu-jitsu and it really mattered to them?
Well, I'll bring it back to the officer that um, worked on my side of town, and then he's sadly gone to the other side, and hopefully
Yeah.
he doesn't get embarrassed, and because he probably be able to guess who he is if he listens to this. But yeah, getting him in has made a huge change to him, and I made a post on Instagram a little while ago that. And I think someone else sort of said something like it, but I've never seen a bad officer do jujitsu or become interested in jujitsu.
That's interesting.
Um, and I sort of sat there and really thought about it and said, okay, there's got to be somebody that really just hasn't not just hides in the shadows, doesn't
Mhm.
really want to go to calls, doesn't really take their job seriously. There's got to be somebody that does jujitsu like that I can think of, and there really isn't.
It's
I
interesting. Yeah.
think jujitsu sort of lends itself to people that want to improve,
Yeah.
and that
Nice.
it in time sort of washes away the people that aren't there for the right reasons. And that's sort
100%.
of what I came to. And this guy, he was a young officer, a good officer, and very interested in the job and how to get better. And he wanted to make sure that he was doing what he could to take care of himself, take care of the community, and get home to his family. And he asked me about jujitsu, and he started coming. And I'm always hopeful that people will stick with it, but as you all probably know, that
Yes.
a lot of people will say, "Oh yeah, no, I love it," and they'll come for 2 days and then never be seen again.
Right.
But he's stuck with it. He's stuck with it, and his jujitsu has gotten better and better. I have to start turning it up on him now. um, his his um, his policing is continuing to get better,
Yeah.
and I think they just sort of go hand in hand. That they're
Mhm.
really, again, I've never seen a police officer that's stuck with jujitsu that's a bad police officer,
Yeah.
that, you know, is heavy-handed, that
Yeah.
doesn't de-escalate, that doesn't uh, see the humanity in people, that doesn't, you know, take care of their paperwork, doesn't take care of their car. Just all of those things have really lent itself to jujitsu and policing. There's just so many parallels. Um, that's why I hope that
Yeah.
more officers will get into it. So that's what I've seen.
Yeah, that's so perfect. That's so perfect. Well, Professor Lucas, I mean, is there anything before we wrap up that you want to ask, since I know that I got kind of a big mouth
Yeah.
here.
No. Like you said, I have a lot of questions, and every conversation it brings up more and more questions every time. So, not a question. I just want to highlight one thing here. Professor Steve also, besides everything else that he organizes open mats, right, on the state of Arizona for law enforcement. And even not being a law enforcement, I had the privilege to be one of them in one of our that we host one of the locations in Queen Creek. It was an amazing experience having together the jiu-jitsu community and the law enforcement community kind of blend itself, and not being part of both, but only on the jiu-jitsu community was awesome to meet new people, include Professor Steve, train with a great level of like jiu-jitsu, have fun, and it was just really nice experience. So I just want to thank you, Professor Steve, to allow me to be part of that on that day, and thank you also for putting that, like everything that you were saying today, blending those communities and having more and more officers being able to take jiu-jitsu for themselves as a stress relief, as a training their skills to be more prepared and make themselves better, but also the community better, is really important. So it comes a lot from people like you. So just wanna thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, Professor Steve, thank you for spending the time with us. And if you're listening to us for the first time, what we're suggesting is that jiu-jitsu, whether or not you've thought of it as something you wanted to do or not, should be considered as something that could really bring a lot to your life. And if you've started jiu-jitsu, if you're like me, you're a beginner, that the ABCs of jiu-jitsu take a long time, and you may be a super gifted athlete, or you may be like me and you're not so gifted, and it just takes a long time. And after a long time, you can form words, so you're not even into sentences, and that takes a long time. I sent Professor Lucas a picture of like the path from the black belt to the red belt. I'm like, how long is this? He's like, that's 48 years. And so I'm 53. I'm hoping to get my black belt by 65. I have to live to 113 to get my red belt. So I'm making sure I have my my vegetables. But you what we're suggesting to you is that the people that you're hearing on this podcast, and we've had jiu-jitsu legends like Pedro Sauer, people who have every right to have a very prideful disposition, and they have come here and they have shown a great level of humility. And Professor Steve, with all your accomplishments, your disposition is one of you have humility, you're easy to talk with, your accomplishments and the things that you've been through have, you position yourself as someone I feel like who's recognizing our humanity, in every kind of conversation. I have found that to be true in the jiu-jitsu community. So all of you who are listening that have been afraid to walk in the door and try it, it's really a place that you're going to be surprised how important it will become for you. And those of you who are in it, and Professor Lucas and I have used the term the blue belt curse, we want you to stay, because, as you learn to form your words and sentences, at some point in time, you're speaking in a beautiful language, but you just have to give yourself the time to learn it. So, Professor Steve, perhaps there'll be a time where you will come back and we can talk some more. And for today, thanks for just a great conversation.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate your time.